Today's story is Bob the Boogie Fairy. This is not a sweet fairy tale. Written by Robert S. Knott. Illustrated by Lara Eade. Published by Make Believe Ideas. Fairyland was a place where all fairies could follow their dreams and find fame and fortune. But not every fairy was famous. In a far-forgotten corner of Fairyland, beyond the magic dust and wands, lived one of those fairies. His name was Bob. Bob was the Boogie Fairy. It was his job to dispose of all those things from your nose. All the boogies that you've examined and flicked, the ones you've squiddled and rolled, and the sticky ones that you've secretly smeared. But not the scrummy snot that you've munched for your lunch. Bob was the #1 boogie expert in all of Fairyland. He knew the difference between a thin and flaky and an icky, sticky, flicky, or a cluster chunk, and a snooze snorter. He even knew how to deal with a bad case of slime snizzlers. Thin and flaky, a super thin, dried nasal mucus that is almost see-through, perfect for the fairy house glazing. Tooth Fairy windows. As icky, sticky, flicky, one of those annoying boogies that no matter how many times you flick, it won't disappear. Cluster chunk, a collection of different coloured boogies that had been squeezed and squashed together over a very long time. Nose snorter, a boogie that is easy to locate but super hard to scoop out. Slime snizzler, a half boogie, half slimy snot that clings the gloopy string to the inside of your nose. However, being good at his job wasn't enough for Bob. He dreamt of being famous. Bob tried everything he could to make his dreams come true. But being the Boogie Fairy didn't help. Sorry, you're not as glamorous as the Tooth Fairy. I don't think you'd make a very good fairy godmother. We've decided to go with the Toenail Fairy. He got his own scissors. Then, one day, Bob's luck changed. While he chiseled, scraped, and mined down the side of Snotty Simon's bed, Simon was a secret smearer, something gleamed and glistened among the cluster chunks and the icky, sticky flickies. It was a tooth! Bob had a new plan. Wait a boogie minute! If I were the Tooth Fairy, I'd be famous in no time. So Bob built a boogie trap, tucked Simon's tooth under his pillow, and waited silently until the Tooth Fairy appeared. Bob burst from the bed and flopped into his own boogie trap. Oh! The Tooth Fairy smiled. She knew exactly what Bob wanted. I could do with a rest, she said. Do you mind being the Tooth Fairy for a while? Bob didn't hesitate. Absolutely! I won't let you down! Bob started his tooth fairy duties right away. He flew from pillow to pillow, collecting tooth after tooth. This isn't that hard. I'm going to be the best, most famous tooth fairy ever, said Bob. However, as morning dawned, the toothless children were in for a shock. For under their pillows, instead of a shiny tooth fairy coin, there was a sticky, icky surprise. Bob thought he had done a brilliant job, so you can imagine his reaction when he saw the Fairyland Star's front page. What's happened to the Tooth Fairy? Boogie's discovered under pillows. Who is the boogeyman? He was finally in the news, but for all the wrong reasons. Bob fluttered home. His dreams of fame and fortune had turned into a nightmare. The Tooth Fairy tried to make Bob feel better. Being famous isn't all it's cracked up to be, she told him. It's what we do that matters. Imagine if the Toenail Fairy didn't clean up everyone's toenail clippings. Or if the Fart Fairy wasn't around to vacuum up all those stinky smells. And imagine what would happen if you didn't collect all those unwanted boogies. It would be a boogie catastrophe. Breaking news! The world is being overrun by boogies. While Bob had been distracted chasing his dreams, people had continued to pick and flick, squidge and roll, and secretly smear. And with no one to dispose of the things from your nose, the boogie's mess had grown bigger and bigger and bigger. It looks like you have an important job to do, said the Tooth Fairy. You're right. The world needs the Boogie Fairy, declared Bob. With his trusted boogie wand and a little help from his new friend, Bob chiselled, scraped, mined, and beat the boogie catastrophe. Everyone gathered for an interview with the fairy of the moment. Where's the Bob Super Boogie Fairy? But Bob had fluttered back to Fairyland. Although Bob wanted to be famous more than anything else, he realized he didn't want to be famous for being the fairy that made the boogie catastrophe, even if he had saved the day. Bob now knew he wanted to be famous for doing something good. So, with an epic fairy tale worth telling, he wrote this book. And I'll hope you'll agree, his story was boogie brilliant. The end. Sleep tight and don't let the bed bugs bite.